Hello, and welcome to the Standstill Podcast. This is an opportunity to hit pause on your busy life as we hear from guests that will inspire you.
Hey Josh.
Hey Jay, how you doing?
Not too bad, how are you?
Good, can't believe episode 7 already.
I know as we always say, we're tracking along quite nicely through the episodes.
No, it's good. I think we've got a good episode lined up with Steve Mansfield.
Yep, and we're talking about prayer in this episode, so you should have a few good discussions. I know Steve's done some special efforts and talks on this in the past, so it should be good.
Yeah, we'll have a bit of a look about making prayer personal and relevant for young people as well. So hopefully you can come away with some tips.
Nice little practical points for everyone.
Yeah, how to put it in practice in your daily life.
Alrighty, let's just jump straight on in with Uncle Steve.
Sweet.
Well, thanks Uncle Steve for joining us tonight for, I think it's our episode 7 of the podcast, so we're tracking along relatively nicely.
Good.
I don't know if you've heard any of our podcasts.
I sort of was going to attempt to last night to listen to one, but time ran out, so I didn't quite get there. But
look, we won't judge, but you're missing out. But what we do at the start of every episode is we do 23 questions.
Okay.
And they're rapid fire questions, and you have to give us a rapid fire response.
Okay.
And because it's AYC2023, 23 questions. Okay. So we'll see how you go. Fair and we've got a bit of a corny jingle that goes along with it.
Right. And I don't have to sing along with that, do
I?
No.
The music we can do that afterwards.
Okay. Yeah.
If you like.
Okay. Yeah.
Rapid fire questions heading your way. 23 questions coming today.
Question 1. Describe yourself in a hashtag.
So it would probably be handyman, I think. Mostly because I'm really terrible at doing practical stuff around the home, so it would be an amazing hashtag. Something to aspire to.
Yeah. What's one thing people don't know about you?
So, probably, although I do talk about this a bit, is the fact, and I always find it a bit exciting, I was actually in the middle of a terrorist raid in Nicosia in Cyprus. How's that for a opening bat?
Yeah, wow. Straight into the heavy stuff.
So, yeah, there you go.
What's something you do every morning without fail?
So, I'm going to say I pray, because I think tonight's about prayer. So the first thing I do is roll out of bed straight onto my knees in one swift movement and prayer for the day. And in actual fact, probably one of the people that influenced me in that was Uncle Bob Lloyd. Because I've been to a few Bible schools. I don't know whether you're probably too young to know Uncle Bob, but he's always a very effervescent sort of person.
Yeah.
And he always used to quote from Psalm 118, "This is the day that the Lord has given. We'll be glad and rejoice in it." And I think every morning at a Bible school, he'd start off with that little phrase. And I thought that's a great phrase to take for every morning. So that's sort of the quote I use for the day.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Dream country to visit?
You know, I've been to every dream country. Auntie Beth always wanted to go to Switzerland. And being a Mansfield, I always knew it was a fairly expensive place to go to. So I tried to defer it as much as I could. But in the end, we went to Switzerland. And my dream country is obviously Israel. Been there a few times.
Yeah.
But where's travel these days? What's with the question?
Well, then on that note, window or aisle seat?
I actually have to get the window because Auntie Beth bags the aisle, so I just get shoved against the window and spend 4 or 5 hours looking out of that. Fly somewhere.
Favourite app?
Yes, I have an Eufy security app, which is my favourite app for this week because I just put security cameras up and a wireless doorbell, and all these things are dinging on my phone. I think it's great.
Best piece of advice you've received?
probably from Auntie Beth, don't do another talk like that again.
If you could master one instrument, what would it be?
Now, this is another little fact. You guys probably don't know, I play the piano. Right. So I've already mastered that instrument. So I'm thinking probably the violin would be quite nice to, master perhaps.
Have the full symphony?
Yeah. I can't do both at once.
What's your favourite colour?
Blue, dark blue.
Dark blue? Least favourite colour?
Fluorescent orange.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee preferably. And I like mine warm too.
Yeah.
Warmer than warm. Hot. Piping hot.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
And both. I'm a chocoholic, so I will devour all of the above.
Stairs or elevator?
I go the stairs because I need to keep myself fit.
Summer or winter?
And I'm going to go autumn, just to be awkward.
Yeah, okay. Cats or dogs?
I'm not really an animal person. We used to have a dog. It was great. Definitely probably more a dog than a cat.
A skill you're working on mastering?
I don't know. At my age, you've pretty well done everything.
Except the violin.
Except the violin. Yeah, I don't know if I've got any particular skill worth honing.
We'll go with the violin.
Go for the violin, yeah.
Sweet or savoury?
Savoury, definitely. Love. Auntie Beth is a fantastic cook. And savoury curries and stuff, amazing.
It's good that you got that in nice and early.
Yeah. Just in case she listens to the podcast.
Yeah. Favourite quote?
Favourite quote, Ephesians 3:20. It's the quotation that says God is able to do exceedingly above all that we ask or think.
Yeah.
So that's been my experience in life. That is my favourite quote, yeah.
Favourite topic in the Bible to study?
It varies. Like, I think you fall in love with the people you're actually studying at the time. Like, whether it's Nehemiah or Hezekiah or Esther or, the Apostle Paul. I think that's a movable sort of a target, and what you're studying at the moment you really embed yourself in. So, yeah that's what I find it shifts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a morning or night person?
Definitely night. Yeah, so I'm glad the podcast tonight.
We're doing it tonight.
Can you come around at 6:30 in the morning? I don't think so. Favourite
way to exercise?
Walk to the kitchen to get a coffee.
That's piping hot. If you could teach one subject in school, what would it be?
In school, teaching a subject?
Yeah. If
I could. Probably something to do with English.
Yeah.
That was the only subject I was good at school, so,
Yeah. And last one, what's the most adventurous thing you've done?
Most adventurous thing I've done, go to China on our own for Bible mission work with no backup. And that was very scary for us. It was back in about 2004. And we were put forward to go to China to do some mission work. And someone was supposed to come with us to sort of give us a handover, an introduction, and they couldn't come, so we were just like, off you go.
Yeah, wow. There you go.
In the deep end, that was, yeah.
Well, we have a lot of international listeners.
Oh.
We have a few random listeners, I think, in the Philippines and Chile as well. So a few cool little shout outs to them. But maybe for those that might not know, would you be able to give a little bit of a surmise of yourself for those who might not know you?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, I guess I'm Australian. You can probably tell by the accent.
Yeah.
Born in Adelaide and married with 3 kids who are all already married. And we have 11 grandkids, so that's really nice, fantastic. And they're sort of reasonably close. Sydney's probably the furthest, Morisset.
Yep.
Joey and Jared up at Wakery, Matt and Lynn around the corner. So I really love being a grandparent because I think you can relax a little bit. And I think one of the statements is, as a parent, you have to teach your kids the long grey plains of life, whereas a grandparent, you can show the kids the beautiful view from the mountaintops. So you tend to, back off a little bit from the discipline, and it's probably more love and compassion. So being a grandparent is, a great experience for me. Enjoy ecclesial life, fully embedded in lots of Bible schools, youth conferences over the years. So, life in the truth has been really good for us, really exciting, really helpful, very profitable. I don't know, is that an
you
could
that's
sort
a cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah, look, and I will say, like, I was thinking today when we were going to do this interview, and I thought we did 2003 host at the Adelaide Conference here on Nehemiah.
Yeah.
And I think it was 2001 Tassie as well. And I have to say that period of life was really great for us as a couple. And I often thought, you know, for the vast majority of brothers and sisters, all they get is like an exhort and a study class, and that's about it. But when you're going to study weeks in Sydney and you get all this amazing activity and the enthusiasm of young people, it really is a great boost. And it happened at a good time in life for us because, you know, our kids were sort of grown up and then you sort of plateau a little bit in ecclesial life perhaps. But because we're involved in conferences and suburban and that, it was just really a great boost for us. So, you know, helped us through that period of life.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. Yeah.
Well, part of the whole preparing for conference and Adelaide Youth Conference in 2023, a big part of the themes that we want to draw out is stand still, which comes from Exodus 14 verse 13, stand still and see the salvation of God. Yeah. And Josh and I have talked about it a little bit over the last few episodes of, you know, kind of what that means in our sort of world, where it's just about, you know, and associated with the idea of prayer, but just pausing and just reflecting, just little standstill moments throughout your day.
Sure, yeah.
So I don't know if you've thought about the whole concept of standstill much, but what does, if it was just off of that summary, what does that mean to you, and how do you relate that to prayer?
Well, I think it is really critical because, as you say, we live in a blur of activity these days. It's go, 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 all electronic media, you know, it's beeping at us and demanding our attention. So I think to be able to wind back and stand still and breathe is a great thing. And in my later years, my radio voice, in my later years...
Your AM voice?
Yeah, that's right. To be honest, I found that I'd go outside to pray. I really find that helpful and important. And to me, that's a standstill moment. So around about 11 or 11:30 at night, I will go outside and look at the stars, and that's my standstill moment. I find that really important because I think for a lot of my life I prayed indoors, and you know, that's fine. I mean, you can pray anywhere, but to me, just to go outside and look at the stars, and every night's different. You know, you've got a full moon or whatever, and it's just really a nice moment for me just to stand still and communicate with God.
Yeah, that's great. And is that something that you've been doing a bit more recently? Or?
Totally. Like, well, you know, not recently in months, but years.
Yeah.
So actually when Nat, our first child, got married many years ago, in fact I went out with all the kids out in the backyard and prayed with them after their baptismal night. And we stood under the stars together, and I said, here's the promises to Abraham, you've just become part of that. And we prayed together with all the kids outside, and to me that, you know...
That sounds really special.
Well, it was, and it brings us close to God, it makes God real, and we're pausing to think about Him and giving Him time, which is what life's all about, really.
Yeah, I think it's like one of what you just mentioned then, and something Josh and I have talked about as well previously, is just about finding a space to do that. And sometimes, like you said, inside or, you know, the last thing you do before bed, it's good that you can do that, but sometimes it's not the you know, most effective way to draw closer to God. And like you said, going outside sounds like a really good way.
I think you got to discipline yourself to do that, because we live in a busy world, and well, you guys know as much as I do, at the end of the day you're exhausted, and we tend to find ourselves in our bed thinking, well, I better finish off the day with a prayer, and I don't think that's good enough for God. And so I particularly carve out a scheduled time at 11:30 for God. It's like non-negotiable. And to me, that's just a critical factor of my connection and relationship with God. You know, I need to give Him that time.
That's good. And that's something we've talked about as well. The idea of being purposeful, or I remember in a talk I heard earlier this year about Daniel, who purposed in his heart, you know, to do something. And I know that's something I've been thinking about a little bit. And, you know, where you sort of have to, I guess, be purposeful.
You lock it in. You got to lock it in.
Because I think with prayer as well, find sometimes, you can end up sort of getting into a bit more of a routine of having like reactive prayer.
Sure.
Where it's sort of, it's either, thank you for different things like after something has happened, or, like a prayer about, saying you're sorry, or whatever it is that, or you're praying for help.
Yes.
Rather than, I like that idea of
being proactive about it. And that was something that I think was the same talk for Suburban Mason Mansfield did. Yeah. And he actually mentioned about putting a little reminder on his phone. So I've tried to do it where at different 2 separate times in the day it comes up on my phone,
and I try and put pause.
But his point was that you stop literally what you're doing straight away. And say a little prayer. I've actually tried to turn that into my little, I've got walk/pray come up on my phone. So just to...
take a break.
Just to switch off from what I'm doing. So I think that's, was a good piece of practical advice for me.
Yeah.
Do you find that, like having a prayer life is something that's very active, like not even active mentally, but like even physically, the way you can communicate?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think body language is important in our communication techniques. We all know, none of us love Zoom anymore. It's a novelty for the first couple of sessions, but we realise we don't get the full gamut of people's body language and expressions. You just see a flat screen, that's all. And I don't think we've fully accepted that dimension into our prayers, because body language is so important in our communication with each other, but what about with God? Right. So when you go into the scriptures, you'll find that a lot of the faithful brothers and sisters were very demonstrative in the way they actually held their body, like, lifting up of the hands is just a way we can express ourselves to the Father. Not many of us would do that. We all sort of lie in bed or just stand there or whatever. So a lot of these gestures, I think, are important to experiment and to bring into our prayer life. Now that I did try lifting my hands outside, I just felt a bit awkward. So my favourite position is to have my hands grasped like this.
Hands cupped.
And cupped, and I offer to God my day. So, as I pray, I imagine that this is my day and I'm going to give this to God. So at the end of the day, I give that to God. Right. And to me, that's just a little body language technique that I use to, add dimension perhaps to my prayer. But I think, for all of us, we can experiment a little bit more. Daniel prayed on his knees, and so did the Apostle Paul when he said goodbye to the ecclesia at Ephesus. So these are all beautiful developments of prayer. And I think sometimes we just grow up and think, well, we just sit in a chair and pray and that's all there ever is. But the ability to express in a bodily way how we feel to God, I think adds a further dimension to prayer.
Yeah, like just a depth of emotion almost makes it feel like you're talking to like a physical being rather than just some process of thought streaming through your mind.
And I mean, I think the other thing too is many of the Old Testament prophets particularly just prostrated themselves flat on the ground in desperation. And I think I've done that twice in my life, and many of us may not have, but we should be encouraged to be able to feel like that when we're desperate and really want to communicate to the Father, how we feel, lying flat on the ground and appealing to God is a very interesting experiment in the way we start to think about prayer. So these are all elements that perhaps we may not have tried because we come up in a sort of ecclesial routine.
Yeah, and I think also when you're in front of other people, you probably don't feel, you might not feel as comfortable doing that. No. But at home it's actually something I probably haven't thought as much about.
Yeah. Well, especially, the Mediterranean ethnicity tend to be more demonstrative with their bodies. And so why don't we bring that into the way we pray to the Father? It's probably a thought.
Yeah, do you have any particular biblical examples in prayer that stand out to you?
Yeah. Well, the Bible's full of amazing people that prayed. You can go from Elijah on Mount Carmel to Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. But my favourite is actually Daniel 6, because to me that was the that was the critical factor that changed my prayer life when I came to understand that Daniel, at an age of 90 plus, had a special routine which he brought into his life and a whole process with which he engaged the Father in prayer. And I'm thinking, well, Daniel at 90, he certainly had a great relationship with God. And it was part of his routine. And we sort of hesitate on routine because we think life should be spontaneous, and so should prayer. It's a mix of all of those things. And I think in any relationship, you do have to have routine. Like, you know, you love a person, you live with them, you want to do things with them, and there's sort of routineness in how we operate in life. And I think Daniel, to me, is the great example of a person who is close to God and he took time out, stood still for God. And there's that whole process where he actually went home and he lived a busy life, like he's in charge of an empire. None of us are at that level, you know. But he still took time 3 times a day, go home. He opened his windows, you know, and you think, why would he do that? This is all part of, you know, body language and connection to the Father. And the other thing is he faced Jerusalem, which, why would he do that? And that's just bringing that into conversation. That's something I do too. There's actually an app on my phone. Anywhere in the world I can actually face Jerusalem.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so, and why would we do that? Because that's the focus of where we want to be, and that's the centre point of God's kingdom. So, you know, we can focus on Jerusalem as part of a technique to, you know, connect to the Father deeper. Daniel did that, and why was it important to him? Well, because Jerusalem was in ruins when he was facing Jerusalem, and I think what was happening in Daniel's mind is reinforcing the promises to God and saying, I know the city's in ruins, but I trust you, I lean upon you, because that city one day is going to become the city of the great king. So, you know, he focused physically, as it were, on Jerusalem, and that's something that we can do as well to orient ourselves.
Yeah, and in a way, Jerusalem might not be physically ruined now, but maybe morally wise, you know.
Yeah.
There's that. But it raises a good question what you said before. Do you feel like sometimes prayer, like, what is it more important to have something that's more I don't know if it's the right word, routinized? Routine
okay. Yeah.
Versus spontaneous?
Well, I think you got to have both. You obviously have to have both, and of course we, you know, invariably go to Nehemiah, who, as he approaches the king, he makes a spontaneous prayer. So those prayers are critical for us, and again, we need to incorporate them more into our life. So a couple of little examples that come to my mind when we were talking about that. Uncle Mike Steele was travelling to, and he told me this story, and I thought it was a great one. He was travelling to America, and he was going to be there for a year. And so he bought this RV, and he's going to travel around America for a year. So he was over at Mount Rushmore, you know, where the presidents are carved. Yep. And it was a light and sound show at night time. They had a look at it, and then he got talking to the person next to him, and they said, "Oh, you're Australian?" Yeah. What are you doing? "Oh, we're here for a year." And they said, "That's fantastic. Let's pray to God that He'll guide you and be with you on your travels." And he said that was amazing, and it was a big lesson for him and for me when I heard that sort of little scenario. Hey, do we go down that pathway where we bring God into our lives so instantly in all that we do and say? So I think we really need to, as young people, as brothers and sisters, sort of think, how can I bring spontaneity more into my life? And again, another example is when we're talking on the phone to someone who's going through a tough time. How many of us say, "Hey, stop a minute, let's just pray together on the phone"? You know, we don't often do that, but we can. Like, you know, okay, I hear what you're saying, I know there's an issue. Let's just stop for a minute and let's just pray together, and we'll try and move through this situation.
That's a good point, because I mean it is so powerful. Like when you think of those situations where you have prayed with someone else, there's something about that. Of course, you've got prayer is so important in everyday life between you and God, but when you do that with other people as well. Yeah.
It's very helpful, and I can remember sitting with a young guy who'd gone through a really horrible time, and I said to him about 3/4 of the way through the discussion, "Hey, let's just have a prayer together." And for me, it was quite an emotional thing, because when you're sitting with someone that's gone through a tough time and you're actually praying to the Father, it's not an easy thing to do. And at the end of it, he said, "Oh, thanks, Uncle Steve." He said, "You know what, my prayer life hasn't been in existence for the last 3-4 months at all. So thanks I feel really comforted after that exercise. Thanks for praying with me." And that was a big lesson to me. You know, maybe we need to incorporate that a little bit more as we try and help people through situations in life. Bring God into the equation. So I think that's a good suggestion, something we could think about as well when we're talking to people that are going through tough times.
Yeah, and I feel like even when you're in those tough times, I don't know if I've necessarily been in the toughest of times, but do you have, and I don't know if people listening to this are similar to me, there's sometimes times where you can't really articulate your thoughts, and if you're going through a little blip on the radar, what you want to say to God, but it's just all bottled up in your head.
Yeah, and I think that's a great prayer. Peter comes to mind, like after he denied the Lord Jesus Christ, and the record says he went out and wept bitterly, and I think that was the most powerful transforming moment in Peter's life, when he basically went out of that courtyard and sat in the street and cried, and that was that moment when he was going through that transformation process to become a disciple in Christ. So I think for brothers and sisters and young people who can't articulate in prayer because they're going through a tough time, that is the moment when you're transforming yourself into a disciple of Christ. And our Father knows how we feel, so it's not the eloquence that's important to us, it's the heart and the soul that goes into it. So I think those prayers are really powerful, when we can't articulate fully.
Would you say that then, I know in Romans 8 it talks about the Spirit sort of makes intercession for us, words that cannot be uttered as well?
Yeah, well, I think that's the Spirit of Christ, of course, helping us to transition through those moments. And we can't always put into words how we feel, particularly when we're quite desperate. But it's an important thing to come into the presence of the Father and to register that. And you guys aren't fathers yet, but some of the beautiful moments as a father or grandfather is when your child comes to you, tears streaming down their eyes, and they say, I'm sorry, Dad, for doing this. And it's a magic moment. It's a great moment.
Yeah, so, like thinking about it now, it's almost when you're in that state of don't know what to say, that's almost when you recognise in yourself that you're in your most complete, vulnerable, dependent state, which, like you said, as a father, that's probably the best thing that you want to see, and you love when, I'm assuming that as a father, you love when your child comes up to you and you just recognise their complete dependency.
Yeah.
Which also reminds me of, there's times in the Gospels where it talks about prayer, and Jesus says, a lot of those times he describes God as a father, how if you know how to give good gifts to your children, then how much more does your Father in heaven? Yeah. And how to give good things to those that ask him. Yeah. There's a few of them where he's spoken as, I guess, a father, and the Lord's Prayer says, our Father in heaven.
Yeah. And I think, prayer is about relationship, and I think one of my favourite statements is it's not an activity, it's a relationship. Because we tend to define prayer as an activity. We think, I've got to do this, or
checklist.
Like it's a checklist, or I won't get in the kingdom if I don't perform this particular practice. It's a sort of a wrong definition, because prayer is actually a relationship, it's not an activity. So therefore, if it's a relationship, we should feel totally comfortable in expressing to the Father exactly how we feel. And really, he's the only one who truly understands. Some of us have partners in the truth that, we express ourselves, but not to the level that God understands who we are. So, that aspect of developing and deepening that relationship is really important. And as we go through our own physical relationships in this life, we know they're changeable and they have to be nurtured. So, for those of us that are youngly married, we go through different phases of life. And that relationship isn't static, it deepens and it changes, and it has to be exactly the same with the Father. So we have to nurture that relationship. And one of the important aspects of a relationship, hope I'm not talking too much. So one of the important aspects of a relationship is you like to talk to the person you love. You can't stop just sort of talking to that person about everything in life, and there's a fantastic double-edged communication. And that should be the same between us and the Father. So it's not to be a stilted conversation, it's like I just want to unburden myself. And that conversation happens, and of course God speaks to us back through the reading of his word. So it's sort of a two-way thing, which is important.
And it's very similar to a relationship in a way where when you do sort of verbal unload, it is like is almost a solace. Like
it is.
It comes over you that you just feel like you've got those things that are sort of weighing on you off your chest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of thinking. It's a bit of a perspective shift thing, to think of it as a relationship, because sometimes we do forget that if you're, I guess, getting into a bit more of a routine, or I definitely can relate to that, where it's like, you think, I have to do a prayer and rather than thinking of that as a relationship and talking to God. And I know my grandpa always said to me to just talk to God. Yeah. He said, not necessarily to give a prayer or whatever. Sure. He says, make sure you just talk to God, have a conversation with Him throughout the day, and I've always remembered that.
And I think that perspective is good, because we grow up often in larger ecclesias where there's a fairly formal approach to prayer. Yeah. And I will say that I think a formal delivery in an ecclesia is very different to a personal expression to the Father one-on-one. So they're not the same. And sometimes because we grow up in a sort of a formal relationship with God in an ecclesial context, we carry that over into our personal life. Whereas, as you're saying, Josh, it can be more of a personal, friendly conversation, respectful, but certainly more friendly in the way we talk to the Father.
Do you find, like, even for young people, even if they aren't baptised, do you have a strong belief that there's an important role for prayer in that aspect? Totally. Because I've been, like, in preparing for tonight, just thinking about it, and I listened to a talk about it, and the quote that was raised was Acts 10, verse 1 to 2. Okay. And it talks about Cornelius. Yeah. And something, you read a verse so many times that not until someone sort of mentions it to you, sort of hear it for the first time. It talks about that Cornelius actually prayed to God. And so he wasn't really in the faith per se at that point, but he was praying unto God. And then it talks about a few verses later that thy prayers and alms have come up for a memorial before God. Yeah. So it's almost as if, the point that was raised, I guess the take-home point that was raised was that it was almost okay to have, for Cornelius, he had a very clearly active role in prayer and was almost seeking truth at that point. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a wonderful example, because often we think, I can only start praying when I'm baptised. And, sometimes in our teenage years we think, I'm not baptised, so God won't hear me. And that'd be totally wrong. Your example of Cornelius is great. He's a person that wasn't a member of any ecclesia, but he's seeking truth and praying to God. And I think that we can transpose that into teenage years, and even younger children can pray. Now, obviously they can't pray for forgiveness of sins because they haven't committed or identified with Christ, but expressions of praise is just a wonderful tool for children to be part of a process of. So I think, I think in the psalm it says, young men and maidens, old men and children praise the name of the Lord. So as parents, I think it's important for us to teach our kids how to pray and to encourage them to pray. And I remember a great example. We were across at Port Hughes a few years back, and young Ethan was out there having breakfast. He sort of got all his breakfast ready, and he just bowed his head and put his hand over his eyes, and Beth came out and she said he was there for about 5 minutes. I think a Weet-Bix had all gone soggy. Who likes soggy Weet-Bix? And she said to Ethan, what are you doing? And he said, I'm just copying Dad. And she said, you don't just close your eyes, you actually pray to God. And he said, oh, do you? Oh, right. And she said, you thank God for the food and for, the day and all those sorts of things. That's what actually is prayer. Oh, okay. So next morning, same thing happens. He's there, just eyes closed, and she said it was about 10 minutes this time. Right. And she said, "Well, all okay?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I had a lot to thank God for today." Parents, and so it was really wonderful little scenario that he realised that it actually was not just closing your eyes and meditating; it was actually praying to the Father. But as parents, this is where we need to, be able to teach our kids that this is helpful. It's worthwhile, it's something you can tap into, and it creates a happy disposition when you can appreciate things in life rather than complaining about everything. So that was a good little lesson for us, I guess. And the other one was with Nat and Danny with their kids. They for a meal, Nat will begin the prayer, and then he'll ask the kids to repeat after him, thank you, Heavenly Father, for this day. And he adds this little phrase, teach us and help us to be good. This is always interesting as a, parent kind of thing. And so they repeat all that prayer, amen at the end. So I think this is a really good progression for parents to involve children and to give them and teach them the capacity to pray. And often when you think of David, God loved him at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, because he's anointed at 17. So it wasn't just a switch that happened one day. God's observing the character and the expressions of this young man on the hills of Bethlehem. And God loved David at 12, 13, 14, 15. Why? Because he was thankful to God for many things. And we see that, effervesce into his Psalms later on in life. So I think it's a whole disposition to life. And certainly Cornelius and other people, young people, can pray to God.
Yeah, I like that point you mentioned about David, because I think for lots of young people that are listening that might not be necessarily baptised, coming to the conference and listening to this, clearly God has a vested interest in your spiritual development up until that point, because obviously, you're not one day waking up in the morning and going, I'm going to get baptised. There's a lot of things that happen to get to that point. So I think even with your example of David, then it's a really nice thought to sort of have.
Yeah.
And even coming up to baptism, I can think personally, of those, I felt like that was times when you feel quite connected, quite connected with God. And I remember just before baptism, sort of just sitting on a hill just outside home and just sort of, being in prayer to God. So it's something all the way up to being baptised.
Yes.
It becomes more of a part of your life, I guess.
Yeah.
Another thing as well that in thinking about tonight was Samuel, when the people confronted him about Saul, or firstly they wanted a king, and almost an immediate challenge to him, and his first reaction was it doesn't even say that he responded. It just said that he went and prayed unto God. And I found for me when I heard that point, I was like, wow. How many times do I, no one's asking whether they can be a king to me, but there are circumstances where you're just challenged with something straight away, and your immediate response is to turn around in prayer. How do you find your life, your experiences with that?
So I think, we've got to condition ourselves to be there in that zone, and it's not always easy when things are all happening, and sometimes we do tend to regulate God to the back end of the day when we've got time for him, which is probably quite wrong. But we've got to train and discipline ourselves to bring God into our life 24/7. And you're right, sometimes we don't always recognise that when things are happening. One situation that does stick in my mind is the Tassie conference some years ago, and we were up at Dove Lake, and it was an outing day, and we were having coffee with the hosts while everyone else was on this long hike around Dove Lake.
Convenient.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, one of the guys come running into the cafe and said, there's a girl, one of the girls is having a cardiac arrest. Oh, wow. And she's on the other side of the lake. A couple of young guys ran in fast to get help, medical help. And there were a few other guys that were doing CPR and that, and that was a frightening thing for us. So the ambulance turned up, took her away, and I can remember on every bus I prayed with the kids on that bus as we were leaving, saying, look, we don't know what's happening to this young girl, but please, Heavenly Father, be with her, give her health and restore her if that's in accordance with your will. And so I think there were at the conference about 7 or 8 buses, 400 and something kids. But I can remember that was important for me. I guess we were sort of, at a conference and all those sorts of things, and just putting that in the minds of kids that here's an emergency situation that's happening, let's access that great resource of the Father that we have, rather than just, okay, let's all get on the bus, what's the next activity? So we've got to discipline ourselves to bring God into the equation, so he's not someone distant or disconnected.
Reminds me of Hezekiah as well. That's one where, Sennacherib comes up, and Rab Shaker says all these words against, who's going to protect you.
Yeah.
And they don't say a single thing, and then Hezekiah just throws himself before God and says, here's all the words.
And the great thing is, in that situation, is he took that letter in. He actually took that piece of paper in, and he put it before God. And, again, we're talking about bodily expressions. That was one there, and it's a bit like when you get a really nasty letter and you take it to someone and say, look at this. And Hezekiah did exactly that. He took it to the father and said, look at that letter. It's disgusting, it's terrible. So, interesting how people sort of brought God into their lives when they're confronted by challenges.
It's even interesting, like even personally writing down a prayer.
Yeah.
We did it. It was like one of our home group Bible study assignments, projects.
Yeah.
And then to look at it a year later and see how many of your, prayers have been answered. And it was quite amazing to sort of realise, because when you're writing, you sort of can't see how much, even when you were 14 years old, your circumstances would change.
Yes. Yeah.
But even then, looking back, you're like, wow, my life's, even in my young age of 14, 15, how much my life has changed. It's quite impactful at the time for me.
Well, I think that's another aspect of prayer, because we always tend to think we've got to verbalise it, or it's got to be words. And, if you're struggling with prayer, why not write a prayer? These are different options that we have. It's not just limited to, I've got to talk to God. No, you don't have to talk to God verbally. You can actually write down a prayer, and that's exactly the same. And the Psalms are all of that. There's a whole collection of David's thoughts as he writes that down. And I think that's a great exercise for us to do. I've done the same as you. You've been embedded in a terrible ecclesial situation, or you write everything down as to how it's going and what you think and what you're asking the Father for, and you revisit 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, and you think, that is amazing. That prayer has been fully answered. It wasn't answered in the first year, but 10 years later, everything shifted around and those answers were there. So it can be very therapeutic to document a prayer, I think. We need to take the time to write those down.
Yeah.
I guess also I know when I've done that before, like you said, when you write down a prayer and you look back and you see the things that I guess were really concerning for you at the time. Yeah. And I guess, a year or so later, you're like, I'm not even thinking about, some of those things. And then it makes you realise, oh wow, it's almost like God sort of picked up that load for you and... Yeah,
taken it to a different place.
Which... Yeah, it reminds me of the quote which is casting all your cares upon him because he cares for you. Even the little things in life, you can hand over to him. Not just the big things.
Another thing I've heard as well is God through his angels really wants to work in your life, and it goes into a completely another topic of free will and whatnot. But make it your free will to bring God into your life because he wants to work through his angels actively in your life, but obviously in a way that can't obviously override that free will, if that makes sense. But the point was bring God into your life, make that your free will, and it was quite a powerful little change in perspective, I guess.
And I think the other little phrase that impacted me too, which I thought was helpful, is that God anticipates your prayers. He's waiting for them. Like, we tend to think, well, God's busy and he's, and we'll edge in with our, prayer. What you realise though, in a relationship, the other person is really anticipating and wanting and yearning to hear from you. And when we think God is waiting and he's anticipating, he wants to listen to me, that takes it to another level.
Yeah, it makes it very personal.
It does. This is the great creator of the universe, and he's waiting to hear about my day. And and it's helpful, I think, if you know that God wants to listen to your prayer, you're not so reticent. And even when you're in a bad situation, thinking, oh, God doesn't want to listen to me, or I've messed my life up, to always know that God has an open ear and he yearns and he wants and he anticipates to hear from you, that can be a helpful thing, I think.
Yeah, that's a great perspective to think about it.
Do you feel like, is there an overriding takeaway point that you want people who are listening to this, on the bus to work or whoever it might be for their little thinky thing for the day.
Okay.
Just to make it.
So the other thing I love is the technique of prayer, and what practical things can we use to give a balanced prayer? And one of the things that we all find is we end up with a little shopping list of things that we want God to do, and then we finish off the prayer and we sort of think, I'm not quite sure that was really balanced. So the thing I love, and I use this as my own technique, is the hand. I've sort of said this to a few people. To me, I go through this whole process in my prayers, and I feel satisfied that I've given a balanced prayer. So the thumb, it's the main finger there, very powerful, represents God. All right, we give the thumbs up to people. So this represents God, and that's how our prayer should always start, with praise to the Father, rather than just launch in this is my problem, fix it. So we need to spend a little bit of time praising God and thinking about his attributes before we launch into our request process. Then the pointy finger, of course, this is the second finger we use to give people directions. It's the kingdom. We're so thankful that Father has given us an invitation to the kingdom, and we reflect on all the beauty of the kingdom, what's going to happen. The middle finger, of course, is the tallest of the fingers. So this represents the governments, the authorities, the safety, the security, the employment that we have. We thank the Father for that. Fourth finger is our ring finger. What do you got with that? Are you fiddling with that ring?
It's on now.
You just slipped that on very quickly.
Yeah.
Ring finger. So this is all about relationships with brothers and sisters. So that's where we bring into our equation thankfulness for our brothers and sisters, an appreciation globally of fellowship, all those things. And then finally, the little finger on the end of our hand is us. This is finally we reflect on the things that we need forgiveness for, and our connection with the Father. And to me, I go through that process, and it might sound as though it's a bit routine, but I feel a lot more satisfied that it's been a balanced prayer at the end of the day. So that's sort of my takeaway, really. Just something sort of practical to help people balance out their prayers.
Yeah, that's super practical and a great reminder.
Yeah.
Every one of those fingers has a certain attribute which you can sort of relate to. And as you're going through, I was thinking of, similar to the Lord's Prayer.
It actually is.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. That's
your kingdom come.
Your kingdom come.
It will be done on earth.
Yeah, and
give us our bread. Forgive us our brothers and sisters, for thine is the kingdom. So it does. It parallels really to the formula of Christ's prayer.
I feel like that's a really good way to end. So thanks very much. Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah. So thanks, obviously, again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Loved it. And I hope the conference goes well, if it ever happens.
Yeah, we're hoping so.
Yeah, hopefully, another year. How long is it now? Another year and
18 months.
18 months.
So, God willing, and COVID being all well.
Yeah.
But, thanks again, and
thank you.
Getting involved.
Thanks, Eps.
Thank you.
Well, how was that, Josh? I really enjoyed it. It was really practical, and I know I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure other people listening, hopefully got a lot out of it.
Yeah, definitely plenty of practical things to put into practice. I really liked the idea of prayer being a relationship, and looking at developing that like you do with any relationship.
Yeah, and always plenty of stories from Uncle Steve, which is good. I liked how he talked about how he even faces Jerusalem when he's saying his prayers. I thought that's
a cool idea. We'll have to suss out what app that actually is.
I reckon it'd be just Google Maps.
Google Maps, just orient yourself in the right direction.
Yeah, no, so I thought that was quite cool, and yeah, like I said, hopefully other people got a little bit of something out of it, and a little bit of a thinky thing for their day or their night.
And don't forget the hand rule. God, others, what's the middle finger?
Yeah, the highest one being the governments, the authorities,
yeah, that's right.
Relationships,
ring
and
finger, relationships.
Pinky yourself. So, no, I thought that was a nice little practical example to remember.
Yeah, it's good. So see if you can remember that with your prayers coming up. And of course, if you've got any feedback for the podcast or things you'd like to hear, get in touch with us and let us know how it's impacted you if you've put a few of these things into practice.
Yeah, details are in the description. So I think it's hello@AYC2023.com. You booking into the conference classic, Josh?
I should be, I guess. I've heard a little bit about it.
You're not going to do that 120k bike ride?
So, no, not really. I don't think I'm cut out for a 120k. Maybe someone like Nath Lyons or could do that.
Yeah. Well, it's just going to be a ride or run, so if you're keen, get in.
So it's is it just running or riding
I think
a certain distance?
The plan is to have a ride and a run, or you can do either or, and there's a few different distances. So. And
this is to raise funds for the conference?
Certainly is.
Sweet, okay.
So yeah, book in if you're keen.
Get in with your friends. By the sounds of things, it should be good, and I'm sure we'll have more details for you in some of the upcoming episodes.
Sure will. All right. Thanks, Josh, for another episode. I really enjoyed that one. Hope you did too.
Yep. Hope you guys got plenty of things to take away from it. So we'll leave it there.
Catch you later, guys.
Thanks for listening to another Standstill episode, the official podcast of Adelaide Youth Conference 2023. To listen to past episodes, see highlight videos, and get all your podcast merch, visit our website. If this is your first time, welcome! You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. The Standstill podcast is released once every month, so we can't wait to see you next time.